Now let's take a look at what happens when a query is executed against our system. When a query is executed against the database, the master node, which keeps track of how the data has been distributed across the data nodes, most often via a hash table that it creates, a plan is created for which hosts it needs to contact in order to get the data for the query. This plan then is executed against a server or a cluster which queries the data hosts and pulls the data together into a middle layer, often called an interconnect layer or a switch. Data is then returned to the user. So in our example, suppose you're a user and you want to pull back an item with a SKU of 7. Your query would come in, and since you've asked specifically for an element by its ID, the query plan would send your query to data node 1, scan 3 rows, and pull back your data. This is much more efficient than scanning all 9 rows or even an index, which is what you would typically have in a relational database. Now let's say you had a more complex query here, and instead of finding a specific product by ID, you wanted to find all products in the category copiers and fax with an item like Hewlett-Packard. As you can see, the data is still spread across all 3 nodes, meaning that the query will have to execute across all 3 of these nodes, but because each query is scanning a fewer amount of records, and then it's joining that data back up together in the middle layer, it's going to be much faster, even in this case when all of the data still has to be scanned, because each individual node isn't having to share resources with the other nodes in order to process the query, plus the data set itself is smaller. This is where a shared nothing environment can really benefit your queries, even if you don't have a ton of data, but if you have complex queries. Now, in a shared everything environment, which is what you typically have in a relational database, even if it's clustered, queries can take longer than they need to, not to mention any potential resource contention issues on the box with other queries completely unrelated to your own.